SITC fam. If you like what you're hearing, don't forget to rate us 5 stars on any podcast platform. Leave us a review wherever you can. And don't forget to subscribe to Lynn and Geselle on YouTube. Follow us on Instagram and find us on Facebook at Sonographers in the Cities.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Sonographers in the Cities. I'm Lynn,
And I'm Geselle.
and thank you so much for tuning into this very informative and exciting episode.
Yes, today we have Amanda and Anne, and we're actually going to be talking about something that I have never really heard about, and we're so excited to have them on. They are from Measure the Placenta. So, Amanda and Anne, thank you for coming on to our podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you. We're glad to be here.
To start off, we just actually wanted you guys to introduce yourselves a little bit and just tell us kind of about Measure the Placenta.
Well, I'll start. My name is Anne O'Neill. I'm the director of Measure the Placenta. Leading an organization about placentas was never my life goal, believe it or not. So my son, Elijah, was stillborn back in 2018. I was 39 weeks pregnant. It was a totally healthy, uneventful pregnancy. After 3 living children, I was just sort of biding my time, waiting for him to be born. And on a Saturday evening, I didn't feel him moving. I unfortunately waited until Sunday morning to go in, which I should not have done. I should have gone in right away when I noticed reduced fetal movements, but I didn't. I thought, oh, I'll just wait till Sunday. Went to the hospital that day and learned he had no heartbeat. We were devastated, floored. It's hard to even describe the emotions, just sobbing. At first, I was completely terrified to look for answers because I thought, oh, it must be my fault. Maybe something I ate, something I drank. What did I touch? Or I don't know. Your mind goes anywhere and everywhere, just immediately to self-blame. But eventually, he was born. The following day, we held him in the hospital. We spent time with him. Lots of tears, lots of crying. The plan was that he was going to be our last baby. After we left the hospital, I did decide to pursue answers. I wanted I shifted gears. I did a 180. I wanted all the data. I wanted an autopsy. I wanted a placenta review. I wanted blood tests on me. I wanted to be checked for all the labs. And the pathologist initially came back and said, we don't know why your son died. But here's the report. And I noticed on the report he had an unusually small placenta. I noticed he was 80th percentile for weight, and he was less than 3rd percentile in his placenta size. So I thought, well, that's really weird, but he said nothing didn't matter. So I was listening to a podcast of all things one day with a researcher named Dr. Harvey Kleiman at Yale University. He's a placental pathologist, a placenta expert. And he said, actually, babies can die because their placenta is too small. So I had all of Elijah's records sent to him, and he looked over everything and said, yes, this is why your son died, is he outgrew his placenta, which automatically launches me into, well, why was this not caught during pregnancy? I had ultrasounds at weeks 35 and 37. I looked back into my records. They checked him, they checked Elijah's body, but they didn't check his placenta at all. So that is basically what launched Measure the Placenta. There are thousands of stillbirths each year in this country. Roughly 30%, we think, are due to small placentas or abnormally sized placentas. Large placentas can also be an indicator of a problem. So that's what launched Measure the Placenta, was my son's death and realizing this is a horrible gap in care that just has to be addressed.
And I'm Amanda, and I live about an hour or so from Anne, and we did not know each other until our babies intertwined us. And like Anne, talking about grief, stillbirth, and placentas was never on my radar. Unlike Anne, my first daughter is who was stillborn, not my fourth. And also, unlike Anne, I had a very closely monitored pregnancy. So our first daughter, Juniper, I got pregnant with her soon after we got married. First pregnancy, so I was kind of at the whim of the healthcare system. And around 20 weeks, she started measuring small. I never had a first trimester ultrasound, and so they were kind of questioning my due date. So because of measuring small already at that point, I was sent to MFM. Prior to this whole experience, I kind of thought like, oh, if you're pregnant and you're seeing a specialist, like something could go wrong. And truly, my experience felt like the complete opposite, in that it felt like nothing could go wrong. It felt like they did not talk to me about any negative outcomes. They did not talk to me about stillbirth. And I started having every month growth ultrasounds. And then 3rd trimester, I started doing weekly NSTs and BPPs at MFM with cord Dopplers. And as my pregnancy progressed, her growth slowed down. She was still growing, but slower and slower, at a much slower rate. Another part of my care was that they changed my due date when I was about 28 weeks pregnant, which should not happen. Part of that was due to her being small, not having a first trimester ultrasound, and also because there was a typo on one of my ultrasound reports about my due date. And so, of course, for most babies, changing, pushing out a due date by 11 days isn't too big of a deal. But when it comes to a severely IUGR baby, it's a big deal. Timing is of the essence, as we obviously know. So as her growth started slowing, they upped my NSTs and BPPs to twice weekly, along with those cord Dopplers. Again, like Anne, I did not know about fetal movement. And actually, when I was pregnant with Junie and they told us that she was measuring small, they said placental insufficiency, which I now know is kind of a misnomer. But at that appointment, I remember my husband and I being like, "Can't you measure the placenta? Like you measure every other almost absurd thing on these ultrasounds, but not this organ." So like it's really sometimes I get chills thinking about it. Like that we literally asked the question and we were told, nope, that can't be done or that's not done. We don't know how to do that. You're under the best level of care. The day before she died and was born, I also felt her movement slow down. Um, because of that changed due date, they were trying to get me to 37 weeks, when in fact I was actually 38 weeks and 2 days when she died. So we found out at my last regularly scheduled growth ultrasound, and I was going to be induced in a few days if I didn't go into labor first. Our experience finding out that she had died was just, it's awful no matter what, but it was extra cruel as the tech left to get a doctor, and a doctor came in we had never seen. And he just said, "There's no heartbeat," and slammed the door and walked out. And that was just like the trap door just opened there. And something I really remember from that moment was not wanting to leave that ultrasound room because then I felt like it would be real. And they were so kind. Our sonographer and one of my nurses came in and like sat with us and cried with us. And I was so grateful for that, especially after that, the doctor slamming the door deal. So then we went home and grabbed some things and went to the hospital. And she was born later that night. She came out looking absolutely perfect. They think that she died. This is Juniper. She was 4 pounds, 13 ounces, 16 and a half inches long. So with her tiny placenta, she still fought really hard. This is her actual bow she wore. They think she died within 24 hours of being born, possibly within 12 hours. And my appointment that morning was at 8 a.m. and she was born at 7:41 p.m. that night. So it's both the biggest blessing and the curse that we were so close. So back to placentas, like Anne, we did an autopsy. We wanted answers. It was our first baby. We wanted to have several babies. And we wanted to know what happened, especially after such close monitoring. Like, how could this happen? Why did this happen when it felt like nothing like this should have happened? So we did an autopsy. Our hospital did a placental report, and like Elijah's, it came back like normal, no red flags, anything like that. So let's fast forward to then in May of 2019, Anne and I actually met because we were in person, because we were appearing on a parent panel, speaking to nurses on how to care for bereaved patients. And on the drive to where we were going, a place called Face Lodge, we started, as we do, swapping our baby stories. And I was pregnant with my second child. Her name is Coral. I was about halfway through my pregnancy at this point, and we still, even with everything, we had no answers as to why Junie died and no answers as to what happened and what we could do different or more because I was already under such close monitoring, in order to prevent another tragedy. Like that second pregnancy, especially without having any information, was the second hardest thing I've ever done in my life because like I remember my 8-week appointment with my OB and she was like, "Well, what more can we do?" I'm like, "There's like we literally can't do anything more to help me like until I learned about placenta size." So Ann and I met, we start swapping stories, and I tell her that Junie had been IUGR because of placental insufficiency. And it was like light bulbs were going up. Like when we talk about this story, I joke that I wish we would have had like one of those tickers to like count how many times we said the word placenta on that drive because it was just wild. So she tells me about her experience and how she found this researcher and encouraged me to send off Juniper's records also to Yale, and which I did. And surprise, surprise, she had a very small placenta as well. Her placenta was 0.1 percentile for size, way, way too small. And she was in the first percentile. So that is the only reason why she could even make it to 38 weeks and 2 days, because, her body growth slowed down in order to kind of keep up with that very small placenta. Um, and that was just, it was, everything's kind of dual in this experience with life of finding out these answers and finding out like it was like, okay, like let's check this baby's placenta size, and that will be the more that we can do. But then it was also like, oh my gosh, like her death was so preventable by taking a simple measurement. So that's kind of where our story intersects and began. That's us and how we met.
It does feel like such a huge punch in the gut to realize your baby died of something so measurable, so simple, so preventable. And how can this be that this gap in care still exists? Like ultrasound has been around for 50 years. How long are we going to go with ignoring the placenta that's so obviously critical to the survival of a fetus? So, yeah.
Absolutely. We're so thankful that you guys shared your stories, and we definitely want more awareness brought to this. And so with Measure the Placenta and you guys creating that.
I show my shirt. Here's my measure the placenta shirt.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Measure
we're
the Placenta.
matching
Love
today.
that.
There's our shirts,
I
represent.
love that. And I saw you guys on social media, and we just want to know more about, your guys' goals and how you guys promote measuring the placenta and even just the estimated placental volume. How can we advocate for that and to, just do better in following pregnancies? As you said, you guys were watched and scanned, and me personally being a sonographer, we want to know more about how we can help in this measuring the placenta, because as a patient currently pregnant, and then also as a sonographer, I actually didn't know much about measuring the placenta, so it would be great for you guys to talk about that.
Sure. Let me describe a little bit about what it is, and then I can talk about some of our efforts to get the word out and things patients can do. So EPV, you're going to hear us refer to that a million times. That stands for estimated placental volume. To get the estimated placental volume during pregnancy, this is a method invented by Dr. Harvey Kleiman at Yale University. If you do Google search for Yale EPV, you'll find his website with tons of information and citations, sources, things like that. But it takes about 30 seconds to do. It's just 3 linear measurements. You're measuring the width of the placenta and the thickness and then the height. And you put all those 3 numbers into a free app called Merwin's EPV calculator. It's on the Apple Store and also for Android. You put in those 3 linear measurements and it will estimate a volume from that. And it will tell you the estimated volume in cc's and also, oh, there it is. Amanda's got it for you. Um, so the red right there, that red arch is the placenta, and then you put in those 3 numbers, and it will tell you the estimated volume, and then you put in your gestational age, and it will tell you the percentile. So if you're 34 weeks along, is that what you said you are?
Yeah.
34 weeks along, and you put in your placenta volume, it'll say, okay, you're 10th percentile, or 50th percentile, or 62nd, whatever percentile. And so generally you want to be between 10th percentile and 90th percentile. I do need to say that most babies born with placentas that are either less than 10th percentile or more than 90th will be born alive and born just fine. This is a risk factor. It's not like a diagnosis that, seals your baby's fate, but it's an important risk factor that we believe should be accounted for. And if your baby's placenta is really small or really large, maybe you get extra testing or NST. Maybe if you're 39 weeks, then you say, okay, time to deliver. We do not advocate delivering a 32-week-old baby with a small placenta. Clearly, the risks don't outweigh the benefits there. But if you're getting farther along in pregnancy, for sure, more testing is potentially an option, and potentially earlier delivery if you're later in pregnancy. Yeah, so that's the basics of what EPV is and how it works. It's completely free. If the sonographer already is familiar with it, it takes 30 seconds, maybe less. It does not need to be billed separately. That's one question we get sometimes. Like the sonographer can just do it and put it in the record, and that's all it really takes. Yeah, do you want to jump in there, Amanda, with anything?
Yeah, I was going to share. So, when Ann and I met, and I was pregnant then with my second child, and like I said, there was nothing more that we could do until I met Ann and learned about this EPB method, especially because Junie's placenta had been so small. So, because of us being local, and then there was a actual stillbirth conference that was happening the next month, it was kind of a random, like stars aligning moment that Dr. Kleiman was actually at this conference. Ann and I were both there, and then there was an MFM doctor that was also there. And Dr. Kleiman talked to her about the technique. And so then it was Elijah's birthday, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so. July 2nd. Yeah.
Yeah. So on July 2nd, with my second pregnancy, Anne came with me to this it was a different MFM group and got to see my second baby's placenta measured using EPV. That was pretty cool.
That was a sweet one.
So
And yeah. I remember
I
you
was
met
just
me at the
gonna
appointment
say,
with like a birthday card for Elijah even.
yes,
Oh,
yes. And
yeah.
I remember like that, like I said, that pregnancy was just so hard from like logical standpoint of trying to like on top of everything else. But I remember at that appointment when she showed the size of my baby and then showed the size of the placenta and that they were like in line with each other. They were a match in size. That was the only time I ever used the word reassurance in my pregnancy after my first daughter's death because it was the only thing that showed me like, wow, like, look, this is healthy. This is good. This is, ideal. This is not the circumstances, the environment that was supporting Junie. Like this is very different, so that was really helpful. And then between my daughter Coral's birth, my second, and then my third, Anne had her rainbow baby. And so then with my third pregnancy, I went to see the MFM Anne had previously seen with her fifth child pregnancy. And at that MFM, that doctor, the sonographers there, measured my baby's placenta every single sonography appointment from 20 weeks until I delivered. And that was really cool. And around like 24, 26 weeks, there were some concerns that I had high fluid levels and that my daughter's stomach, not the abdomen, her stomach was measuring large. And so they actually upped my frequency of coming in. And so I went in and they would measure the amniotic fluid, they would measure her stomach, and then they would measure her placenta. And that was literally the coolest thing ever. And it really made like that, pregnancy after loss a second time tolerable and reassuring. Otherwise, I could not use that word reassuring in any way, shape, or form in my pregnancies, except for monitoring placenta size.
Yeah. It means the world to a lost mom with a prior stillbirth to have the placenta measured, especially if that's what's the cause of the first stillbirth. Like that's what caused her prior baby's death. That's the measurement she wants in the subsequent pregnancy. And yeah, it's just
And
so
it's
critically
and
important.
it's just a measurement. Like in my like realistic mind, it's not an invasive thing. It's not something that's requiring an MRI machine or going anywhere super special. It's just something that can be done on ultrasound, something to be another data point to assess this pregnancy, and something else that maybe can provide reassurance if someone has had a prior death of their child and does not want to repeat that experience.
We definitely agree with that. And I think this is gonna help me move forward when speaking to like other sonographers. I'm so curious to see if they do that. Do you know if they put that into an MFM protocol or if it's something that is not quite something that they do for a reason? Have you guys been
Yeah.
doing research on this kind of stuff?
Yeah, good question. So right now, placenta measurements are not standard of care. They're not officially recognized or endorsed by ACOG or SMFM or any other major maternal health organization. We are working on
But
that.
we're working to change that.
However, in our interactions with ACOG, it's been quite discouraging, frankly. They always say, go talk to someone else. We can't help you. basically it's not a priority and they don't care. They
Find a
told us,
celebrity
yeah, they
was
told us
one
go
of their
find a
suggestions.
find a celebrity to endorse your cause, go talk to politicians, we were told.
Ah,
And we were like, wait, ACOG, this is your job. Like you should care deeply about getting placentas measured. And we understand we also want to see more studies. So that's another big thing we're doing is trying to launch research. And before this is like widespread rollout to everybody, it would probably be good to have more research. But for sure, for starting to collect data for mothers who request it because they want it for their own knowledge, for lost families, I think it makes absolute sense to do it now. Um, so yeah, our advocacy with ACOG has been quite frustrating. So some of the pushback we hear is, yeah, more research needed. And they say specifically, we want like this large, controlled, randomized study that shows placental measurements lead to a reduction in stillbirth. Well, those studies don't really hardly exist for anything. All the measurements done during pregnancy today, that has not been, that study that ACOG says they want has not been completed because stillbirth is a pretty rare outcome. And so you need a massive sample size in order to get that. So the measurements that we're doing during pregnancy today certainly have some research behind them, but not the gold level standard that we say we want, that ACOG is saying they want. So that's one hurdle is getting the data that they say they want. To me, it just seems like a red herring and kind of a go away kind of a thing because we've asked them like, tell us the exact study you want. Tell us like the study design. Will you help us fund it? Will you go to NIH to tell them to fund, to ask them to fund it? Will you do anything, lift a finger to help? And they're just like, no, go away. So yeah, ACOG not engaging meaningfully has been our biggest hurdle. We feel like this is their job.
Because a lot of doctors, when we have advocated for this, we have both experienced this ourselves and many moms that we've spoken to. So many doctors, so many sonographers will say, like, well, ACOG doesn't recommend it, so no, we won't do it. Like specifically, even the MFM doctor Ann and I both saw has not done it for other patients now because there's just so many different practice guidelines. So that is why we're trying to get ACOG stamp of approval on it so that that's not a reason that they're pushing back. And also just in general, there is a lack of data collected on placentas at all. And that's just, we're trying to really multifaceted approach to spreading this awareness. And we speak with ultrasound and sonography groups. We're, petitioning ACOG. Ann and I have both personally been to Washington, D.C. supporting legislation changes. We've had let's see, Anne, we've met with CDC, NIH, all these different
Yeah.
groups, just trying to get a box on forms so that the placenta is weighed at delivery, because that is something that doesn't happen. Like if it's, like smaller steps to this bigger picture of getting placentas measured during pregnancy, like we're trying to do all of these different things and go about it at so many different avenues to try to be successful.
One other thought I just had on the research side of things, I would argue that the research that does exist right now is really compelling for doing placenta measurements, and that is there's tons of research showing that small or very large placentas are linked with poor pregnancy outcomes. That includes stillbirth, NICU stays, preterm birth, infant mortality, even longer term things like mental health diagnoses or heart abnormalities, things like that. All of these bad outcomes are associated with small placentas. That's crazy.
Preeclampsia, cerebral
Preeclampsia,
palsy,
cerebral palsy.
there's
Yeah,
so
like
many.
the list goes on. And so, like, and stillbirth. Did I say stillbirth? I should say stillbirth. Are all linked with very small placentas. That research is robust, I think I would say. We know that this is a problem. And then, meanwhile, we also have research showing that EPV, the estimated placental volume tool, can accurately measure placenta size in utero. And so to me, that's a really compelling level of evidence to start measuring placentas during prenatal care. What we do not have in the research is showing that if you measure placentas, then you will reduce stillbirth and like as a cause and effect kind of thing. That's missing. And that's the research gap that is so hard to fill. So
But
we
we
just,
also feel like it could just start being done because
yeah,
there's no harm in it either, given
yeah,
given all of that research.
yeah, especially at 39 weeks, like with the ARRIVE trial. there, and we joke like you can decide you want to deliver a baby after 39 weeks just because it's a Tuesday and you feel like having a baby. That's the Arrive trial just gives us that confidence that it's okay to induce at 39 weeks. So what if we measured placentas and if there was any question mark or concern after 39 weeks, just deliver because there's no reason not to according to the Arrive trial.
I have every amount of confidence that if I had been deuced a day prior, my daughter would be here alive. She'd be 6 years old and experiencing kindergarten. I have no doubt in my mind that she could be here and should be here. And you should share Dr. Florescue's case study. You remember that one?
Yes. I'm trying to remember some of the medical details. Help me fill in the gaps. But we had
Yeah.
an OB who did this fabulous study. Can we link to it in show notes when I dig it up and stuff? Okay, because the details are a little fuzzy, but she had a patient who presented with reduced fetal movement, and so the OB here decided to just track this patient more closely. There
And I want
were
to say she was like 36-ish weeks when she started
yeah,
reporting the reduced movements. Does that
yeah,
seem right?
later in pregnancy.
Yeah.
Later, like some oh, and she started measuring the placenta at this point too, and realizing, okay, this placenta is small, but I can't induce at 36 weeks only on a small placenta. But it was the small placenta measurement that led to this doctor bringing this patient in for more scans. And then by like 38-ish weeks,
Yep.
the
I think she
amniotic
was
fluid was
38
low.
and 2, like
Yeah.
Junie's exact. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
So low fluid.
Yep, low fluid, and it was low enough fluid to trigger a delivery, still according to, standard protocols endorsed by ACOG. And then the baby was born alive and healthy, mother was fine and everything. The placenta was weighed, it was very small. But it was that small placenta measurement at about 36 weeks that led to the patient being recommended for more monitoring. And it was that extra monitoring that detected the low fluid and a baby in distress that led to the delivery, the safe delivery at like 38 weeks. I feel like I might be getting some of the specific
Yeah.
details wrong in
Yeah.
that story, but that's the general arc of it, and I'm happy to link it in the show notes. I'll send it to you guys. So that to me is just this inspiring example of like, here's how placenta volume measurements could be used in a very safe and effective manner where you're not Wild West just inducing babies willy-nilly early, that's a problem. But you're saying, hey, this patient has a risk factor for a poor outcome and probably needs a little bit extra monitoring. And right now it's something like 80% of patients with a stillbirth had no known risk factors ahead of time. Like the stillbirth was just like mine, was out of the blue. We had no idea that there was a problem, and poof, there's a stillbirth. And it feels so sudden and jarring, I'm sure, to the providers. But that's a red flag to us that we're missing something. There's something out there that's leading to a lot of these stillbirths that we're not monitoring.
And
And
I
we would
also think
propose placenta
Junie's,
measurements.
yes, and I also think like Junie's story illustrates a gap in care in that I was under the closest amount of monitoring, and still that very small placenta, her life support system, like her life support was unplugged. It ran out of steam, it ran out of gas. Like that is the one thing that could have changed her story and my story, and our podcast conversation could be so different today had that gap in care not existed. We get really fired up about this stuff, you guys. If you can't tell,
Do you hear? We're
No,
kind of like, "Ugh."
we love
Yeah.
that, especially
Yeah.
because it comes from, passion, it comes from personal, experience. And that's kind of what Lynn and we love talking about ultrasound, learning more about ultrasound. And we think this, your guys' story and obviously your cause is really important to get the word out there for all to see. So we definitely appreciate you guys sharing and wanting to tell everyone about measuring the placenta. Where can people actually find you guys? And if they had questions or if they wanted to know more about your journeys, where could they go find you guys?
so on social media, we're at Measure the Placenta. Just like the name says, that's what we're fighting for. And I wanted to share that what we were just kind of talking about, that finding a small placenta doesn't necessarily mean like red alert, get the baby out right now. It's just another piece of info to use. And we recently did a collab post with Natalie Anvey. And she was our sonographer in our video. So
Yeah.
make sure you check that out or feel free to share that one because that one was so much fun to make. She's the greatest. So
We
social media, we're pretty active on there. Send us a message, give us a follow. You can find us on our website. If you're a lost parent listening to this, we also have a placenta related stillbirth support group. on Facebook. And then we'll also make sure to link Dr. Kleiman's website and our website.
Yeah, you can email me at directors@measuretheplacenta.org, and our URL is measuretheplacenta.org too. Thanks. Feel free to reach out. We're happy to answer questions. If you want to see a list of providers who are currently doing EPV, we have that list on our website as well. We get regular emails from patients wondering like, hey, do you know of somebody in my area who will do EPV? So if you're a patient, check out that list. We'd highly recommend those providers. Or if you're a sonographer or an OB or anybody who would like to be listed because you're willing to do this measurement, we'd love to put you on our website and connect you with patients who are looking for this.
And if we didn't mention it prior, on our website and on Dr. Kleiman's website, there is a variety of resources explaining how to take the EPV measurement. There are printable PDFs, there's training videos. Dr. Kleiman did a video with Dr. Rad. He's like the Kardashians OB. And he's done EPV before. And actually, I was going to mention before the Dr. Florescu case study, Dr. Rad had a very similar situation with the patient as well, that the patient reported reduced movements. He decided to measure the placenta, and then it caught something, and then it triggered a delivery, that other risk factor, and that baby also had a small placenta, born wonderfully alive and well. And it's just crazy. So just had to add that in there.
Yeah. I think you said this, Amanda, but we have so many resources on our website. We have a 5 fast facts flyer about like if you're trying to summarize what is EPV and why is it important. We have a flyer for that. And I think Amanda said we have training videos if you're just new to EPV and want to know, okay, what angle do I hold the probe and how do I do this to make sure I'm doing it right? We have videos on the website on how to do it. And then Dr. Kleiman is always happy to train providers and train sonographers, either like questions via email or doing like a Zoom training. He's very happy and engaged and willing to do that. So just send me, if you're interested in that, send me an email, directors@measuretheplacenta.org, and I'm happy to connect you with Dr. Kleiman.
And also just in general, if there's a sonographer out there or even a pregnant mom patient that is looking to help advance our cause and advocate for this, we'd love to have you. You do not have to be a lost parent. You do not have to have an experience with a small placenta in order to help support our efforts. We truly believe that we won't be able to make this change until people that it hasn't affected care about it enough to raise their voices along with us. So please reach out if you're interested in that at all, and we'd love to be connected with you and also support whatever it is you are doing in your own practices.
That's awesome. I know I've been really quiet because your stories are very intriguing, and my background is not OB or any pregnancy related. But I just kept thinking about Giselle as you guys are telling your stories. And it's like, so if expectant moms, they hear this and they know to measure their placenta, and knowing that it's not part of the standard protocol, can they request to have that
Yes.
measured?
Yes, 100%. And in fact, that's probably the most common way that placentas do get measured during pregnancy is that the patient is informed and aware, and they're like, oh, I want my baby's placenta to be measured. By the way, it is the baby's placenta genetically, not the mother's placenta. I thought I'd just throw that in there. But absolutely, it's self-advocacy is how placentas get measured today during prenatal care. So on our website, we have these flyers of like, help, how do I, talk to my doctor about or sonographer about what placenta volume measurements are. Yes, we have this flyer. We have another, the 5 fast facts flyer that will just kind of lay it all out and help providers understand, how do they get trained? Where do we find out more information? So yeah, self-advocacy is by far the primary way that placenta volume measurements are being done. A lot of doctors just haven't even heard of it too. Like that is honestly our biggest obstacle. It's not that doctors are like against it. It's just like it's a blank slate. They don't know because it's not part of their training. They didn't learn it in med school.
And backing up, like you're pregnant, you're a sonographer, and you're like, I don't know, are they measuring my baby's placenta? Are they not? Like there's just the placenta is the most understudied organ in human biology. And it is the only temporary organ our bodies grow. And so what did Dr. Kleiman, when he got into placental pathology, he was like, I want to study placentas because he was connecting some dots there, and he compared it to like cleaning the bathrooms. Like he's this grad student and he's like, I want to clean the bathrooms basically because it's just so low on the hierarchy.
Right. They joke that like if you're a first year pathology student, they just throw you a placenta and they're like, here, cut this up and learn about this before you do something that actually matters. It's like perceived as like trash
Mhm.
and unimportant. And you're like, wait, this is when my baby is in my body, this is my baby's lungs, liver, kidney, and digestive system. Like this is sustaining the life of my baby. This is important. But in the pathology world, and to some degree in the medical world, it's just like, oh, it's not the baby, so just whatever. But yeah, it's
We
nearly
want to see
ignored
that
during
change.
pregnancy. Yeah, which is horrible. Like, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand that the placenta is essential for the life of a fetus to make it to birth.
And even a tiny bit of self-advocacy you can do that is not invasive at all on top of all of this is when your baby is born alive, well, have the placenta measured. Have it measured on weighed on the scale right after they
Mhm.
do the baby. That's what I had done with my other babies.
Yeah,
And that is just a very helpful piece of information to take with you either way.
yeah. You could learn about like risk for future pregnancies if you realize, oh my goodness, my baby's placenta was very abnormally small or large. You've got that data point now. If you have a subsequent pregnancy, that you're higher risk for recurrence. Yeah, but placentas are not weighed after birth either, which we would love to see that change too. But one problem at a time.
And I think we touched on this too. Another part of this whole equation is it's not just the size of the placenta by itself.
Yeah,
And I kind of touched on this of it's the ratio, the relationship between the size of the placenta and the size of the baby that is
yeah.
also very telling at assessing the health of the baby in the pregnancy.
Yeah, research really shows that both are risk factors. Both the size of the placenta alone and that ratio between the placenta and baby both are can be problematic risk factors.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We
there's
would
so
love to
much.
end it with measure,
Measure.
identify, prevent.
Yes.
Absolutely. No, definitely. It's something that I think we need more people to be aware of. And we really appreciate you guys doing the work that you're doing, fighting the fight for all of us women who really don't even know that these things are possible and then the situations are preventable. So we really appreciate what you're doing, all the work that you guys are putting in. I know it's not easy, especially with trying to get people to listen. I mean, we do the same for ultrasound. It's something we're trying to advocate to all different types of things, but the healthcare in the US really needs some kind of change and it starts with us. So we really do appreciate you guys coming on and sharing your stories. Do you guys have any advice for students or sonographers that are interested in OBGYN or that are going into this that are listening that they could bring with them to clinicals or even just in their practices once they become sonographers?
I would just say and encourage them to ask questions and to push the status quo a bit because, like, decades ago, we didn't wear seatbelts. And now we wear like seatbelts are a standard, safety mechanism. And so, like, I think we should all always be pushing the envelope and looking for ways that we can add to what we're doing and to make improvements and to improve outcomes in pregnancy.
Yeah, to piggyback on Amanda, I'd be curious, like in their training, what are all of the measurements that are taken on the placenta? We know like the location is important, but what are they and is that sufficient? It's sort of like a just a question to ask. Surely we can do better than, the minimal things that we're doing right now. The other thing I'd say, like if you're working with a loss parent, just know that every time you turn on that ultrasound machine and put the probe on the patient's belly, like that is a terrifying moment for that lost parent because they're worried that their nightmare is going to be relived all over again and you're going to tell them there's no heartbeat. So first thing you can do for that patient is go find the heartbeat and say your baby is alive. The heart looks great. Hopefully. And that there's no guarantee. Maybe that baby
And
hasn't
then
made
and
it.
just and
But
just stay there for a
and just stay
moment
there and
because
let them enjoy seeing their baby's beating heart. Hopefully it's still beating because we can't take that for granted. So for a lost patient, that's just so critical for a sonographer to do that as the first thing. And just to know, and you can even like in their chart, be aware that this patient has had a loss before. What they're coming in for the scan right now, it has to be so triggering. I mean, it's just like one of the most worst moments in their life when they've learned that their baby died. So just be extremely sensitive to that. Use their baby who passed away, use their baby's name, offer reassurance when you can. Just be aware that this is a hard thing for this patient in front of you.
and don't treat like if you do see in their chart that they've experienced a stillbirth, don't treat it like an elephant in the room. You're not
Yep.
gonna ever make it worse. You can only help them feel safe,
Yep.
supported, and seen. And that's just huge. Like just to acknowledge, like, wow, this is probably really hard for you. And like that validation is so helpful, and it's like a life raft getting through PAL, especially like in that sonography appointment. It is so huge and helpful. And I agree with Anne. Say the baby's name. If it's not in the chart, you can say, oh,
Mhm.
I saw you had a baby, July 2018. What was your baby's name? You could, and just
Yep.
kind of like follow their lead.
That's going to be really helpful, especially because they're not. I think OBGYN is a very sensitive field, and a lot of people go into ultrasound thinking that's one of the things that they go into it, at first thinking, oh, I'm going to just scan babies, but they don't realize how hard it is to actually do. And then also just the emotional part of it and not knowing what these women have been through before. We don't know much history or unless it's given to us, right? And so
Mhm.
it's definitely one of those difficult jobs to do. So I think that advice is going to be really good and helpful for them coming from you both who have experienced loss. And we definitely appreciate you guys coming on to our podcast.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
before when you were talking about where to find us, I forgot to mention my own personal Instagram account. If anyone wants to follow me there, I share a really unfiltered view of life after stillbirth. My handle is at OrangeAF Mama. If you want to find me there as well, a little bit less tidy, less professional.
I think people nowadays like to see the more authentic side of things and they like to see the behind the scenes. So that's really great that you're doing that and it gives people an insight into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us. We really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
And
Thank
thank
you
you for
so
coming
much.
on. It was lovely to talk to both of
Yes,
you and hear your stories and hear the story behind Measure the Placenta.
sure.
I learned a lot, and I
Mhm.
know that our listeners and viewers will learn a lot too.
Yeah. Thank
We
you so
appreciate you
much.
guys. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for connecting through sounds with us. We appreciate you and can't wait to connect with you again next time.